there. Let's get back to Daniel Lacalle then, Chief Economist and CIO at Tressis Gestion. France, keep threatening to talk about it, so let's do that. When does Monsieur Macron deliver on the reforms?
It is very, very difficult. I think that he has strong support, but remember that we have seen this before. We saw it with Sarkozy. Tremendous support for reforming the country. The country has been 2 decades in stagnation, has completely separated itself from Germany when they were in similar terms of growth, employment, and all of the macroeconomic metrics. So the risk here is, what support is he going to get from what he calls a sclerotic economy, he himself? The first problem is the enormous pressure that he will get from the unions and from the public sector. The workforce in the public sector is about 22% of all of the labor force. So it's very, very difficult to undertake big reforms. The second one is that the tax cut that he is mentioning doesn't put France even close to competitive in terms of other countries.
At 25%, you say that's not competitive still?
No, not
that's
25. No, but if you look at the tax burden in France, is the highest in the OECD, one of the highest in the OECD. So the problem that France has, and one of the highest in the European Union as well. So the problem is that tax cut, if it's not significantly stronger, and more importantly, if it doesn't go to reducing taxes on labor, which is the big problem for employment, it's not going to end up delivering. It might...
It's a series of problems, isn't it, when you talk about the tax system for employees? Not just the tax rate, take that on board, but also the cost of having an employee.
Absolutely.
Because if you want to terminate the employment, there is very strong ability of the employee to turn around and sue the employer and demand a fairly large compensation package. Until those compensation packages are taken down and the risk to the employer is lessened to an extent, you've got to say employers, unless they have very clear clarity on their growth story, are not going to take on employees. Yeah,
and it's excruciating and very, very complicated for SMEs. Very, very complicated for SMEs, which at the end of the day are the largest part of value creation and job creation in France. So the tax system, the bureaucratic system, and the rigidities of the labor market are too strong, and the reforms that he is mentioning only barely tackle the problem. So that's the reason why I find it so complicated.
How could Macron get around the unions? Because there have been ways already where he's gotten around obstacles. I mean, Donald Trump, the white knuckle handshake that didn't go so well, and now there's a dialogue and a conversation maybe bringing the US back into a climate change agreement. I mean, that's quite a U-turn. Haven't got there, but something could actually happen at this point from almost no outcome. And then if you see that the corporate tax changes, we're talking about tax harmonization with Germany. It's almost making it as though it's a Eurozone problem, not a France issue to be addressed. So there are 2 very big obstacles he seemingly has navigated in a short period of time. So what would he do with the unions?
Well, I'm going to say first, every time I hear tax harmonization in the European Union, it means increasing taxes. Harmonization is always done to the highest. But let's, jokes aside, the other important thing of bringing the unions, you have to bring the unions to work with management in the companies, like the Nordic countries do. Everybody talks about the Nordic countries and the union participation within the Nordic countries in the economy. Why do they do that? Because they're within the companies, understanding the business, understanding the way that companies grow and how they're going to create more jobs and invest more. Not participating like, in which you have to pay them to simply be there, which is the problem in France. As you know, it's a country in which if you have 50 employees, you basically need to have a union guy or woman simply just overseeing things because the unions say so. So you need to bring unions to management and to understanding how businesses works, because if it doesn't happen, they continue to be just a burden, and that is the way that, for example, the Nordic countries addressed the issue, and I think it worked.
So how long has Macron got here? How long's the honeymoon period before the gloss comes off?
I'm going to say that the honeymoon period stops at the end of the year. I think that at the end of the year, you will see that in terms of economic growth, in terms of ability to change capital structure, in terms of regulation, it is much more difficult than what we are willing to give him credit for.
Okay. Daniel, thanks for being with us this morning. Good to have your company. Daniel Lacalle, Chief Economist and CIO at Tressis. Jess, John, from Karen and myself, a very good morning to you. Stay with the channel, though. Steve will be up next with Street Signs.